Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is June 28th. On this day in 2018, a quiet newsroom in Annapolis, Maryland became the site of a devastating attack. A gunman entered the Capital Gazette and opened fire. In just a few short minutes, 5 people were killed, 2 others were wounded, and the community was left reeling. It was one of the deadliest attacks on journalists in U.S. history, and it was driven by years of obsession and bitterness. Today, we're remembering the victims, examining the path that led to this tragedy, and honoring the resilience of those who survived. Let's get started. The Capital Gazette's offices sat in a modest building on Bestgate Road, just a few miles from the heart of Annapolis. There, reporters focused on hyper-local news. City council meetings, high school sports, community events, things like that. The staff was small and tight-knit. It was a space where journalists felt safe doing work that they believed in. But around 2:30 p.m. on the afternoon of June 28, 2018, that sense of safety was shattered. That day, 38-year-old Jared Ramos arrived armed with a pump-action shotgun. He was equipped like someone who was preparing for combat. He had smoke grenades, a backpack full of tactical gear, and had even taken steps to disable the newsroom's rear exit in order to trap people inside. Surveillance video later showed Ramos calmly shooting through the front glass doors and walking into the newsroom. Witnesses said that he moved with deliberation. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't panicked, he was focused and methodical. The gunshots echoed throughout the office. Some staff members dove under their desks. Others ran for bathrooms or small offices to hide. Phil Davis, one of the reporters who survived, later said, quote, "There's nothing more terrifying than hearing multiple people get shot while you're under your desk, and then hearing the gunman reload." Police received multiple 911 calls within seconds. Officers arrived quickly, within a minute of the first call. They rushed into the building and found Ramos hiding under a desk. He surrendered without a fight. He had tried to obscure his fingerprints and damage the serial numbers on his weapon, hoping to slow the investigation. But everyone in the newsroom knew exactly who he was. What happened in those 2 minutes inside of the Capital Gazette was nothing short of devastating. 5 lives were taken. 5 colleagues, friends, people who had spent their days telling other people's stories. Bob Hyacinth, 59, was an editor and a columnist. He had joined the Gazette after years at the Baltimore Sun. He was known for his sharp wit and his generous spirit. He mentored young writers, encouraged bold storytelling, and had a voice that was both thoughtful and humorous. His brother, novelist Carl Hyacinth, later called him, quote, "a remarkable human being who believed deeply in the value of community journalism," end quote. Wendy Winters, 65, had found journalism as a second act in life. A former fashion editor and mother of 4, she was the Gazette's community beat reporter. She knew everyone, and they knew her. When the gunman opened fire, Wendy reportedly grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a trash can and a recycling bin, and charged at him. Authorities credited her brave act with saving lives. Gerald Fishman, 61, was the paper's editorial writer. Soft-spoken and intensely private, Gerald poured his heart into unsigned editorials that guided the paper's voice. He had worked at the Gazette for over 25 years, and his colleagues described him as a gentle soul with an unwavering moral compass. John McNamara, 56, was a jack of all trades. He covered sports, edited copy, and knew Maryland high school athletics better than anyone. John had been with the paper for decades and was known for his deep network in the community and his love of storytelling. Rebecca Smith, 34, had only recently joined the paper as a sales assistant. She brought joy to the office. Friendly, upbeat, and full of energy, Rebecca was just beginning to carve out her career. She wasn't a journalist by trade, but she was part of the team, and her loss was no less profound. 2 others survived the shooting with injuries: reporter Celine Sanfelice and intern Anthony Messenger. Their quick thinking helped save lives, and both would later become powerful voices for survivors of trauma and press freedom. In the hours and days that followed, vigils popped up across Annapolis. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes lined the sidewalk outside of the newsroom. One sign read, "Thank you for telling our stories. We will never forget yours." Jared Ramos didn't know these victims personally. His rage wasn't with any of them. It stemmed from a column published in 2011 by journalist Eric Hartley titled "Jared Wants to Be Your Friend." The article covered a criminal harassment case against Ramos. He had been charged after sending threatening and obsessive messages to a former high school classmate. The story summarized court proceedings and included public records. It wasn't untrue or sensational, but it embarrassed him. And Ramos never let it go. He filed a defamation lawsuit against the paper, Hartley, and then-editor Thomas Marquardt. The case was dismissed. The judge ruled that the column was factually accurate and protected by the First Amendment. But for Ramos, the legal defeat only deepened his wound. In the years that followed, he became increasingly fixated on the paper. He created online accounts to post lengthy, angry rants accusing the Gazette of conspiring against him. He mentioned Hartley and Marquardt by name. He spewed conspiracies and venom. Though concerning, his posts never contained explicit threats, so that made it difficult for police to act. But Marquardt later said that he had warned authorities years earlier. Quote, "I was seriously concerned he would threaten us with physical violence. I even told my wife, we have to be careful. This guy is unstable enough to do something terrible." End quote. But nothing was done. And in 2018, after 7 years of stewing, Ramos put his plan into action. After the attack, Ramos was arrested and charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder, plus attempted murder and firearms violations. Initially, he pleaded not guilty. Later, his legal team shifted strategies, arguing that he was not criminally responsible due to mental illness. They said that he suffered from a delusional disorder that prevented him from understanding the nature of his actions. The case dragged on for years, with delays caused in part by the COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, in 2021, the trial began. Jurors heard testimony from forensic experts, survivors, and psychiatrists. The defense claimed that Ramos believed the newspaper was conspiring with the government to ruin his life. Prosecutors countered with a mountain of evidence showing deliberate planning, from the purchase of the shotgun to the steps he took to block exits and destroy serial numbers. They argued that Ramos knew exactly what he was doing, and the jury agreed. On July 15th, 2021, Jared Ramos was found criminally responsible and sentenced to 5 life terms without parole, plus 345 years. Anne Arundel County State's Attorney Ann Colt Leadis spoke for many when she said, quote, "He wanted to silence the press, but they came back the next day and put out the newspaper. He failed. The First Amendment won." End quote. The pain from the Capital Gazette shooting will never fully fade, but the response from the community, the survivors, and the broader world of journalism has been powerful. The very next day after the shooting, the Capital Gazette printed a full edition. On the front page were the names of their fallen colleagues, followed by a stark headline: 5 shot dead at the Capitol. One editorial page was left blank with a single sentence: "Today, we are speechless." In 2019, the Pulitzer Prize Board awarded the staff a special citation for their courageous response. Outside of their new offices in Annapolis, a memorial called Guardians of the First Amendment now stands. 5 pillars represent the 5 lives lost. Behind them, a granite wall bears the words of the First Amendment. Wendy Winter's daughter, Summerlee, said it best at her mother's funeral, quote, "She died the way she lived, fighting for others, unafraid," end quote. And in many ways, that spirit lives on in every journalist who keeps asking hard questions, covering city council meetings, and telling the stories of the people who shape our communities. The Capital Gazette shooting was an attack not just on people, but on the principle that free information matters. Yet, out of tragedy came resilience. Out of silence came voices. And through it all, journalism carried on. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found today's episode compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!